we had a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago on the Slack channel, and Cosner Christian said it was about this idea of microservices. And Christian said all the work to wire up the front end with the back end when Drupal gives you so much is, in his opinion, more painful than it's worth. What's your experience been?
It's been really nice, actually. I haven't done anything with commerce yet, like any of those complicated forms that like are provided by modules, but I haven't had a problem retrieving content and making adjustments on the back end. I think I've gotten a basic contact form to go through and feed back into Drupal, but I haven't done anything crazy yet.
Cool. Yeah, so in general, whether you're talking about Drupal or not, in my experience, when you have pages where you want a lot of user interaction and dynamicness, that's the word, on the page, it's a great use case for Angular. What's happening here?
We lost our feed on that thing.
Oh, that's right. We're projecting this to the world. People in 82 countries are watching this right now. Should I just continue now? Or
Yeah, I'm just going to show the TV now.
Hold on a second.
Sweet.
Let's get back on here. Okay. So if you have a page on a site, like let's say you have a, in fact, let's go straight to an example here. Put it on there. I want to go to, how many of you use New Relic? I'm not trying to talk about New Relic right now, but they use Angular, and they have this really cool user interface. And so it's a good model to look at. So you have all these parts of the screen. You have this graph here in the middle. You have this table down here below. You have parts of your stack that you can drill into. You have the time period you want to be, here you want to be looking at. And so with Angular, you can have all this model information or the data separate from all this. And so in building a screen, you don't make the time picker and do a query and do the graph and do a query. You have the model all come down to the client. And then based on the different views on the page and the interactivity, like if I double click something, it's going to drill in and give me more information. With Angular, you separate that view in the model, and then you wire it up. You may have heard the term MVVM, model view, view model. And so it's kind of this layer between the view and the model is the model view, where you can have different elements that are all based on the same piece of data. So, but for every element, you don't have to wire it up with on-click callbacks and things like that. If you change one piece of data, everything that's bound to that automatically changes. So I won't try to get too much into selling the benefits of Angular, but that's kind of a high-level overview, and we'll look at this a little bit more in a minute. So anyway, if you've ever tried to do a site where you have lots of pieces on a page, and you have multiple ways to do the same thing, and multiple things you're doing, and changing the state changes the view, it gets messy really fast if you don't have something like Angular. So I've kind of explained this here. Here's an example site to kind of illustrate this concept. This site's used by a bunch of nonprofits. To help in their fundraising efforts. Instead of saying, if you give us $10, we'll help 5 people. They wanted something more visual and interactive that kind of immerses people in the experience. And so here you can see, if you just look at the page in terms of the elements, we have navigation through these different topics. We also have navigation here. We have these donation amounts people can choose, and we have this text. And if I click a dollar amount, it gives people an idea of, if I give $10, here's what the result is. Here's how I make a difference. And then if I change it, I can go through, and it looks pretty simple. But if you try to do this without a tool like Angular, there's multiple things changing. Like if I change it,
you would always need to be rendering that page.
Yeah. And so if I change from hypothetically giving monthly to every pay period, you know, this has to change up here. And so this is an example of an Angular site on Drupal that uses this benefit for just one content type. These kinds of pages are set up as a content type. And so only this part of the site has to load Angular. Everything else doesn't have to mess with it because it doesn't need it and doesn't use it. So that's an example of wanting interactivity. You know, you're not just displaying a table or a report or a form. You want it to do something immediately when people interact with it.
And can I add just Drupal set and comes baked in with jQuery?
Yeah.
So if you want Angular, it's a little extra something, right, to get there.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. There's an AngularJS Drupal module that works a lot like the jQuery, where you can pick the version you want, and you can pick a CDN to get a newer version than the default if you want. And so it's a lot like the jQuery update module. I love Nacho. So before Angular, you would have these different things on the page, and you would uniquely identify them with IDs on the DOM elements, or if you had multiple elements doing the same thing, you might put a class on and then put a handler for that. Whereas with Angular, you have this model, and by model I mean, for example, if you had a form on the page and the form has values that you've filled in the past I've done projects where that form and the input fields on the form is where that was the place I kept the data. And if I wanted to refer to that data, I would use jQuery to talk to that form and grab the data from those input fields. Whereas here, the form is part of the view that's separated from the model. And the model is just JavaScript objects that are held in memory. And so when something changes, there's one place where that data changes. And so you don't have issues with changing it in one place, but you forgot to update this and that, because three different actions can change the same thing, and it can really turn into spaghetti code quickly. So this New Relic example, I brought that up. They have the graph, data table, selection widgets, all operating on one data model. And when you click a button, like if I change, instead of wanting to show the last 30 minutes of data on my site performance, if I change it to an hour, I don't have to have code that goes in and changes every part of the screen that might be affected by that. The fact that all those parts of the screen were already bound to that model, it's called two-way binding, as soon as I change a piece of data, everything else that's bound to that is listening and automatically changes when I do that. And so it makes the code base a lot lighter. You don't have all this code that's harder to maintain. That's the link, and that's to our site. You have to log in. You can, if you haven't used New Relic, you can set up a free account and use it up to a certain level before you have to start paying, and so you can try it out. Nacho, I was wondering if you would like to join me in my quarters this night for some toast. So now we're taking this whole Angular concept and moving it into Drupal, because we know with Drupal you don't just start an HTML page and add your tags and your head and your body and everything to a page. You have this whole framework of templates, and you have to understand the HTML template, which includes the page template, which includes the node template. And so knowing exactly where to integrate something like this isn't necessarily straightforward. But this is a quick version of the steps. Install the AngularJS module. And that comes prepackaged with the Angular libraries that you need. Pick your version and a CDN if you want, Google, whatever. And then when you create data, on a normal page request, you do the page request, it would query the database, get information about a page, and then plug that information into the template and return it as HTML. In this case, you're querying, and the only data you want to return is JSON, because the Angular templates are going to do all the lifting on how you lay out your page. And so in the Drupal world, this Drupal settings object in JavaScript is a great place to put it, because then you just have it available everywhere. Then you attach your Drupal to your view. In my case, I attached it to a node, but you might have some custom page that isn't really a node, it's just some one-off report that you're making, and you want to use Angular on that page. And so you would attach it to that. But then this module has the AngularJS init application function. And that basically loads the core files that you need for Angular onto that page. And then you write your JavaScript that's specific to the page.
Attaching to your view, is that a config thing? Or is that a custom code thing?
That is a custom code. That wouldn't happen through the web interface.
Was that like a custom library?
Yeah, it's like in the past there was Drupal.js, and then the more recent recommendation is pound attach.
Got it.
And you could attach JavaScript to a specific form or page, or
so that's how you limit it to one content type?
Yeah, and so on a node, on a hook related to the node, like the pre-save, I believe is the one I used on this, you would attach it so that it only is part of that page.
Okay. Well, like a hook node view, you check the content type.
Yeah. And you can attach directly in pre-save. There's a build object, and you can attach it to that, a lot like you would to a form. And so, as you can see here in this folder structure of the AngularJS module, it has a couple of example modules, this AngularJS examples and AngularJS map. If you want to dig in 30 minutes, I don't want to try to dig into code and put everybody to sleep, but I want to point you to where you can do that and run it on a local machine if you want to try it. And then you can go through and see exactly how everything's being set up in the Drupal world. But again, you're going to have it probably in a module or a theme.php file if you do it in your theme. and then you're going to have it in your tpl.php file for, in my case, for the node. Angular has this concept of, well, not just Angular, but declarative versus imperative programming. Like in declarative, you would just say, here's a DOM object, and I'm going to give it an attribute with the tag ngapp. And in the background, the app knows how to act on that because I put tag ngapp equals dog or whatever. And that lets the application know how to fire and get started. Whereas an imperative approach would be you're specifying it line by line in code. Here's what I'm going to do. I want to load the DOM, and then I want to load Angular, and then I want my app to be loaded. And so just in general, Angular tries to be declarative, where if you just create either, you create new HTML tags called directives, and so instead of like a div tag, you could create a dog tag, and then in your Angular app, you could, in the background, define what a dog tag means, and it's smart enough that it just teaches your browser how to deal with that, so your browser knows how to make it just like it's in the other HTML. You could have a picture of a dog, a Sharky if you want.
Or the military dog.
Yeah, but you could do that with anything, whether it's a form or a widget or in Drupal speak, blocks. If you had a block that you wanted to do with an Angular approach, you could create directives, so you can create it once and then use it in multiple locations without having to recreate it and wonder if you're duplicating code or having to change it in multiple places. So, in summary, if you have a use case where you want something really dynamic, maybe you start it and you think, oh, I don't want to mess around with Angular, I haven't played with it, I'm pretty good with JavaScript or jQuery, I'll just write it up. And then you start getting into it, and it starts getting messy, and what you thought was going to be pretty simple starts getting hard. That's a good time to take 2 hours and spend a little time in Angular and see if that would help you, because I think it's very useful. So I think that's it. Any questions? Anybody that's not done an Angular site yet but has wanted to, and maybe has a specific idea you've been thinking of for using, whether it's Angular or React or Backbone or any of these front-end frameworks?
Good question. How much modification do you need to make, or just writing new ones on the TPLs you need to do for
let me show you an example of one, and that's where this concept of directives is so cool. Let's see. Zoom here and page what's going on. What am I guessing? Here we go. Thought I could use Command plus, but it doesn't. Command Control equals. Can you guys see that or not?
Command Shift plus. That would be
Shift
nice.
plus.
Oh, Command Shift plus. Oh, there we go. That made it a little bigger. So here's an example of the node from that RImpact site that I showed you. You can see all this is common. Yeah, let me zoom in a little. Yeah. Can you say Control Shift plus? Zoom. Control Command equals is what I saw, but I found some. I have it set up with Vim keyboard settings, and so some of the commands don't work like they said they will. So let me see if I can zoom this. And if anybody knows, tell me. I won't.
Can you do Command Shift A to get the actions and then try to type in Zoom?
And Shift A. Zoom.
Let me give you that same thing.
You could try holding command and miss on your trackpad. That might work.
Maybe it zooms just up one level. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Here we got it. Okay, is that a little more seeable? A little more?
A little more.
Do like a little more. There you go.
Oh, and that's too much, go back.
Let me close this. Okay, so here you can just see this is in the default node templates. It has all those variables that in the default would be available. So you can ignore all this, and then you see how big the node file is. And really the meat of it is right here. This HTML element is one I created, my impact get app. Or sorry, my impact get. And by using Angular, Angular tells the browser how to interpret that HTML element. And so tonight I won't try to get into what goes into that because that takes a little effort. But you can see that by this right here and this ng app attribute and this ng controller attribute tells my app this is an Angular app. Go grab the JavaScript that you've created for it. And then this right here creates this whole thing, all of this and all of the interaction in the background. Yeah.
And then Joe, so that node template is it a node underscores content type override or something?
Yeah, this is node impact.tpl.php.
So that's the content type.
So for this one content type, it uses this template. For the others, it uses the regular.
Cool.
And so that's all that's needed. And then you have all this interactivity, which is basically you're creating JavaScript to act on the data that you gave it. In this case, the page only needs to load once, and it's just kind of a slide presentation, basically a glorified slide presentation. But if you had something where you need to interact with the data real time, you're just doing AJAX in the background, and Angular has things to do that, just like jQuery would have the .get or .put or whatever. Angular can work with jQuery or in isolation. So it doesn't rely on jQuery necessarily. Any other questions? Sure. Did you call it the holodeck? Well, that's way cooler than the
if I can get back up, I have to get if I can get back up.
Probably not.
I can't know if you Slack me or if you have Slack on your phone. I'll be here for the.
It doesn't matter if I come back up or not. I just have this card that we use to put all the stuff down. I'll here. So that's.
Do you want me to go with you now?
Oh, I was asking about. I don't want to interrupt all the people.
It's too late.
Well, actually, I don't really care. I'm a marketing sure. You guys have to do it. I'm totally kidding. You just gave me the worst.
Marketing, he has no conscience. No hard skills. Sorry, so yeah, I'd be glad to
just
show you that over after. Anybody else?
We're gonna post all this like in Slack or
I'll put the PowerPoint on, I can post a link to it in Slack. I'll stick it in SlideShare. Kind of as a high-level overview filled in by the discussion, so, but if you were here, it might be a good reminder. That's it.